We have a request to copy the nutrient file from plant 2 to plant 1 and to QA. So what that means is that right now I'm looking at our data store for our checkmate system. If we go into plants, we have our central plant, Land O'Lakes. And there's a file in here. Let's switch this. This NE file. So this is a nutrient, this NE file SMX. This is a file that's used in order to help define the nutrient profiles for things. This is kept in Central, but I don't think we have this file in any of the local plants. And one of the problems with this that we found is that when you are editing the nutrients in Checkmate, it locks people out from using the nutrients. So it tends to keep people from doing much of anything. So a way around that was to create a plant that was just for editing nutrients. And this is nutrient setup. This is plant 2. So Land O'Lakes is plant 1. This is plant 2. And there's an NE file here also. So generally what we've done is that the file is edited in this plant, and then we can copy this one over to the Land O'Lakes plant, plant 1. So that's the copy from plant 2 to plant 1 that we're talking about. Now for small edits, we could actually have Sandy or whoever else is making the edits just go into plant 1 and make the same change there. But since if this makes the most sense when there's a lot of changes to be made, because it takes some time in the editor, and in this case it really only holds the file for a second or so while it's copying the file, because none of the processes use the nutrient setup one directly. So really all we have to do is copy this file from nutrient setup to Land O'Lakes. Of course, the other thing that's good to do too is when we do that is to, in order to keep QA up to date, is to copy that same NE file from the nutrient setup plant to both nutrient setup and Land O'Lakes in QA. Now, in case something goes wrong with this, either there's something wrong with the edit that's been done or there's something that goes wrong with the copy, it makes sense to make a copy of the file before it gets moved over. So if you look here in Land O'Lakes, there are a lot of time-stamped NE files. So I've done the same thing. So generally what I've done is gone into Land O'Lakes in production and Land O'Lakes in QA and nutrient editor or nutrient setup in QA, and make a file, make a backup copy of each of the NE files, and then copy it over. Now, of course, that for what's a fairly simple thing, that's actually become a bit cumbersome. So what I've done is I've created a script to do this. Actually, a macro, sorry. So in here, any file copy from P2 to 1 and QA. So from plant 2 to 1 and to QA. We'll take a look at it. And so that says that we're going to make, this first section does is make time-stamped copies of this nutrient file in QA, in production, QA, and QA nutrient setup. So it just makes a copy of this and adds the date and time to the file in each of those 3 locations. Then there's a pause here because I just wanted to, before we actually do the copy, wanted to have the person running this batch file have the opportunity to make sure that it actually worked. Now sometimes if a process is using one of those files, you won't be able to make a copy of it. So I'm not really sure if some of these copy batch files I generally run from one of the servers. Don't know if this can be run from just the desktop here. So I'm going to try it just to see if it works from the computer here. And it's running. I'll bring it here. Okay, so copied. One copy, one copy, one copy. Okay, so this seemed to have worked from my computer, so we don't really need to have, we don't need to go onto the server. It looks to do this. We'll make sure when we actually do that. So let's check to make sure that this worked the way we thought it would. So if we go into plants, Land O'Lakes, and NE file, so it is 2017, 21st of December, and it's 4:55, so 12. So yeah, that's right, and it's 24-hour time. So this was at 4:54 p.m., and so it's 16:54. So if we do run this, if we run into a problem and we have to run it again, because I have run into a time when it was unable to make one of the copies. So if I run it again, it's going to have two different ones, different timestamps. Now this we'll find the same thing in QA, that these files have been created there. Now these ones look like they copied successfully. So we should go back here to Land O'Lakes. And if you notice the date stamp on the previous iteration of this file was 1027. Now if we go to NE file SMX, it has 1218, which is the date that it was edited. So that one copied. And we would find the same thing in Land O'Lakes and in Nutrient Setup in QA if we went there to look at that too. So this file can be run from just our PCs. We don't have to log on to the server to run it. Unlike, say, the some of the plant copy files, like production to QA, some of those, there's enough data transfer that it's not efficient to do it from the PC. And there's some copies in some areas that don't work very well from doing it from one of the PCs. I'm not sure if it's a rights issue or the way the batch files are written. But this one does seem to work. And that's all that we have to do. Now, if we do run into problems with one of them not being able to copy, generally that would just be because something is using one of the processes. So in that case, you could try again later. Now, if it's only partially finishes, we'll go back to the batch files to look at that. All right, so this is done, so I can hit any key to exit. So in each of these cases, it does the production one first. That's the one that we really care about, because that's the one that is going to be put into production. So if the first one goes, then they're essentially done. If need be, if for example, this one failed, then what you'd want to do is you could tell Sandy or whoever's requested it that this one, that the main the copy to central worked, but that we would have to do this piece again later. Now you could run the batch file again in order to capture these ones, because this will just get copied over, or you could just do this copy manually for these last two. If one of these ones fails, then it's probably best to try again later and just use the batch file again, because it takes care of the burden of creating the backup files. So if you run this and one of these fails, you'll see it, and then set this pause. What you would do is you'd hit Control-C in order to break the batch file run.